Welcome to yet another episode on Danish construction law, this time about the conclusion of consultancy contracts. We are moving to some extent to the Public Procurement Act here. We are just on the limits of the curriculum, but in order for this to make any sense, we need to just touch the limits of the Procurement Act. And also here, of course, the ABR 18, the standard contract for consultancy agreements, plays a certain role. The ABR 18 is predominantly about the content of the contract, and as you know, at this point in the course, we are still focusing on the formation of the contract, how the contract is entered into by the parties. Later on, we will focus more on the content, but as we've seen already before, it's very difficult really to differentiate between the two because, one leads to the other. So again, here the core is for the public sector client or employer who is contemplating a construction project and hires various advisors or consultants to help him out. And in this regard, as mentioned, the ABR 18 is obligatory for this type of client, as discussed already in the previous installment. So the same rules apply here, but we will touch upon that again. If it is not a public sector project, then indeed, of course, the ABR 18 as well as the rest of the AB system may well be utilized by any private entities, any private clients, and certainly is to a large extent for larger projects, as also mentioned already several times. For a private client, a private employer, of course, he can pick and choose between all the statutes in the AB system. Only has to be clear about what applies and what doesn't apply if and when he submits a tender. If the assumed value of the contract is above the threshold values of the Procurement Act, then the public client has to submit it through the system of this act. And as I said, we are at the limit of the curriculum here, so we'll not go into the details as how this is done, but in large terms it is the same procedure as we saw regarding the Tender Act, only here at a European level, so it has to be announced throughout Europe in the official gazette and so on and so forth. But here we have the threshold values, as you can see in the right column. We have building and construction, and of course this is not building, this is goods or rather services in the middle column. So relative to whether this is the central government, the limit is above 1,072,000 and a bit, and for other public authorities a bit higher. Here it's 1.645. So it's above that level. It'll have to go into the system of the Procurement Act. So that's what you need to know about that for now. We'll come a little bit back to it actually. But there's a small caveat here though, which we should mention, that even a public sector client can avoid using the AB system to some extent if this is justified in the situation. So it's not completely obligatory, but they have to give a good reason. So this follow or explain, either you follow the AB system or you explain why not. About the outer framework, one might say, for the consultancy contract, the consultants are in any, even small construction projects, consultants will be involved to some extent, almost always, without exception. So for many good reasons, consultants are involved, and of course consultants take care of many different tasks. So some of these tasks may be relevant more often than others, but certainly consultants will almost always be involved, at least in the design and technical development of the project. The consultant is the client's representative towards many other entities, other consultants for that matter, builders, authorities, and also usually assistance developing, designing, organizing, coordinating, and supervising the overall construction project. We will look more at the various types of consulting here in order to specify what is the scope of these contracts, the overall scope. So is what we call here client consulting or project management, which is a consultant which is closely linked to the client in developing the project from the start, designing the tender material and issuing also the tender in all of this, and to some extent often will follow the project throughout the construction phase as well. Then we have the technical consulting and assistance, basically design, architectural and engineering services. Total consulting or all-inclusive consultancy will include both of the above. So it means also here that one advisor or a group of independent advisors under one agreement with the client undertakes all or almost most consultancy tasks in the project. So that is kind of like a turnkey project in construction. This is almost the same within consultancy. You may also have a shared consultancy model, and here the tasks are solved by several consultants, possibly also including a construction contractor, and they're all doing their bit in developing the project. And this thing about the contractor who's also involved, that is the trend for the time being, is that the contractors will become or are becoming more and more involved in what was previously the more sole area of the consultants. So the contractors are, to some say, they are kind of breaching the area of the consultants, becoming involved in all kinds of project management and development and design and engineering. So that's also is the new trend, that the contractor will be involved at an earlier stage in development of the project. Of course, this doesn't happen all the time, but that is the general trend for the time being, and this model will kind of take account of that. Also, the consultant may choose to have some of the work otherwise, which he has been given the contract on, to have that subcontracted to somebody else, just the same way as the contractor may subcontract some jobs. Perhaps, and this also applies for the contractor, some jobs are kind of reserved for the consultant himself according to the contract with the client, but certainly not necessarily. Also, there may be a need to have some specialist consultancies in for maybe structural engineering or other specific tasks. So they will have to discuss that amongst themselves. And if the consultant himself finds that there are some parts of what he's otherwise been given the task to do, which he doesn't feel comfortable about doing, and that he will need some additional help or to expand the scope of the consultancy to these areas or whatever, then he must so tell the client, and the client will decide, of course, what should be done about that. And he should, of course, do this before the contract is signed. If there's something in the provisions of the contract which he's not comfortable performing, of course, then he should be open about that. It's a little bit like the reservations regarding the contractors. Now we are coming back to the issue of the Procurement Act and the tender according to this. If the expected fee of the consultant exceeds the threshold values, or if the contract has some specific cross-border interest, the rules of the Procurement Act must be followed. If it is above the threshold, then there are clear rules. If it's below the threshold, there are some other requirements. If the contract does not have this cross-border interest, which means that would it be normal for someone in another country to give a bid for this job, had the opportunity been presented, or not? This may be a difficult decision, but normally this would not be relevant. So if it hasn't got these, then it is recommended, it's not required, but then it's recommended that a certain procedure similar to what we talked about in the Tender Act will be instigated. So this means either the informal bids or a more regular tender. If there is this international cross-border interest, then there are specific rules about announcing the contract in a wider European scope. Then the client consultants will prepare the tender normally and will also kind of conduct the process of the tender on behalf of the client. If there are deviations from the ABR 18 or the ABR system as such, then this should also be presented in the tender material. Project management is a possible task for or one of the consultants also, because as we've seen already, there may be many different consultants as well as many different parties all over, constructors and others involved in the project. So there may be a call for a project management task as well for the consultant. The project manager's tasks are outlined in the service description, construction and landscape 2018. This is the more detailed description of the services to be provided attached to the ABR 18. Once again, thank you for watching.